What's all the hype about gluten-free foods? Gluten-free is one of the most popular and most serious food trends in years. In this podcast, we'll define gluten and explain why some shoppers don't eat it. We speak with dietitian Deana Preble about where gluten is found. She discusses alternatives to gluten, as well as how to avoid contaminating food with gluten.
Just kind of a little cliff notes of gluten intolerance and celiac disease. Your body is intolerant to the protein that's found in wheat, rye, and barley, and that protein is called gluten. So those people who are gluten intolerant, celiac, their body actually will attack itself if that food is consumed. And there's these little hair-like substances in your intestine called villi, and they grab the nutrients after they've been digested, like your vitamins and your minerals, and they pull those into your cells. So what happens when you're gluten intolerant is that all those little hairs get kind of eaten away like sandpaper because the white blood cells just eat them. And then there's nothing for your nutrients to grab onto to get pulled into your body, so you just end up eliminating them. So you really are malnutritioned. The good news about it is that if you eliminate gluten from your diet, you will heal and you will feel better. The bad news is you can't ever cheat because you're only going to truly heal in the absence of gluten. So it's super, super important to always eat gluten-free. There's a lot of those ancient grains like quinoa and rice are alternative flours that you can use to make your breads. Rice flour is a common one. There's a teff flour, which is another grain. Some people use flaxseed meal, which is more like a seed, not a grain. A lot of oats. Oats technically don't have gluten in them, but they're often processed on lines that wheat is, so they make gluten-free oats. But a lot of people use gluten-free oats. You know, it takes some finesse and learning how to combine like tapioca and sorghum and even bean flours too to make a good texture bread. You have to add some different chemicals to them so that it'll rise. Our bakery doesn't do any gluten-free foods just because the risk of cross-contamination is super high. I mean, I know of people who even work in the store who are gluten intolerant, and if they spend too much time back in the bakery with all of the particles flying around, oh yeah, they can get really sick. Well, gluten is a common filler because it's a protein, it's a binder. So it's going to keep everything together. But yeah, that's an issue. You wouldn't think it would be because you wouldn't think of grains being in deli meat, but you do have to check and make sure that there aren't any. So they have their own slicer, or if they're using a shared slicer, the slicer is completely cleaned and sanitized prior to any usage of or any cutting or slicing. Our deli will do some gluten-free sandwiches, and what they simply do is they do them first thing in the morning when everything is sanitized. You have to make sure that that integrity is maintained on that, or people can get sick, and then that's no good. You know, same with even dairy products. Milk is gluten-free, but even like a yogurt, if they put a flavoring in there, making sure that that flavoring doesn't have gluten in it. It can get complicated. You know, the folks that have this, you know, have booklets and they read labels and make sure that, you know, there's no gluten or anything derived, like even starch can be derived from wheat. You know, you just don't know, and the label has to specify that. Because celiac disease is just starting to really be known and really become like a focal point for new products. Everybody is kind of getting into it. A lot of them will say on the label if they're gluten-free. But the nice thing, because wheat is a major allergen, if it has wheat in it, it has to say contains wheat on the label. Legally it has to, according to the labeling laws. It's probably best to, you know, if you have a health professional that you can, you know, refer them to, you know, to do that. Or a lot of companies will post it on their websites, or you can always call. If you have like a box from your manufacturer, there's usually always a 1-800 number on there, and you can call and find out if there's gluten in any of in the meat or in the cheese or whatever you're doing in that area. You know, and you can always get back to the customer. And they'll probably appreciate that extra mile that you went to do that for them.
Now you can see why gluten-free foods are serious business. Labels are the best spot to find out if a product contains gluten. If you're unsure, ask your store's dietitian. Check the manufacturer website or call the company's customer service line. You can check your department to see if there are any policies in place to avoid gluten contamination.